Hello and welcome back to Books on the Go. I'm Anna and I'm here with a November wrap-up, which is also a non-fiction November check-in or reporting back, and I've failed dismally with I had a huge TBR, which we knew that I was never going to get through. But in the end, because of things we've been doing for the podcast, I've also had some novels to read. And the one non-fiction book I did read, I've lent to Amanda now, so I don't even have that with me, but we'll come to that. So, first of all, The Promise, and I apologise about the light, it's moving at the moment, so we might be half shade and half lit, but we'll just press on. So, The Promise by Damon Galgut. This won the Booker Prize for 2021, and so Amanda and I did it for the podcast. We had not heard of Damon Galgut before, but he's a very highly acclaimed South African author and has been shortlisted twice before for the Booker Prize. So very well established and has now won. And this is, we think, a worthy winner. It's set in South Africa. It's about one family over a generation, and told the structure is 4 funerals. And he got the idea from a friend who made a comment about having been to 4 funerals in his family, and Damon Galgut thought that would be a good way to structure this a novel. So it centres around the 3 children, Astrid, Anton and Amor, and their mother dies at the beginning of the novel. Amor remembers seeing her mother speaking to her father and making him promise to give part of their land to their black maid, Salome. So Amor wants to see that promise upheld. At that time, black South Africans weren't allowed to own land, so it had to be a verbal promise, a verbal sort of agreement, if you like, and nothing's really done about it. And over time, we also see South Africa changing. So he has that as the backdrop, but it's really the family dynamics. And then the impact on a white family of both the aggression and racism and violence of the apartheid era, but also the changes that occur and how that leaves them sort of stranded in the past, and you see them sort of disintegrate as the novel goes on. So it's a really, really beautifully written, without being overwritten, book. Amanda rated this as one of the best books she's ever read, which is a big call, and she just loved it, and I sort of loved everything about it, but it didn't move me, so I didn't come away from it sort of raving about it in the way Amanda was, but I couldn't fault it. It was tightly written, really accessible, very engaging, so I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. It's uncomfortable because it gives you only the white perspective, and you're conscious as you read it that there are no black voices in this novel, so it feels like a huge absence. And the interesting part about that is that Damon Galgut seems to be aware of that and makes a few references in the book to the fact that we're not hearing those stories. And he's got also, in terms of this white family, he is satirising them sort of gently and subtly, but in some parts it's quite witty and quite dryly funny about how ridiculous they can look in terms of their attitudes and then how it comes unstuck for them. So the writing was excellent, the sense of place was exquisite, the landscape, the changing times in South Africa. And one line that struck me was one of the characters says, "Aggression hurts the aggressor." And that was if you like, the moral of the story, but that seemed to be the message that the book was saying, and certainly with this family that seems to be the case, and things don't go well for them. So The Promise by Damon Galgut, I think a really excellent book, beautifully executed novel, worthy Booker Prize winner. It didn't sort of really grab me in the way that it did for Amanda, but I'd be interested in your thoughts if you've read it. And next up, The Luminous Solution. I don't have it with me, but The Luminous Solution by Charlotte Wood, which I've lent to Amanda, and so I don't have it with me. I loved it. So it's a series of essays on creativity, And Charlotte Wood, who's an acclaimed author, she's best known for The Natural Way of Things, which won the Stella Prize, and then her latest novel is The Weekend, which is also excellent. And so she writes a bit about writing those books, but her writing is so clear, so strong, and really very readable and sort of robust, but she comes to this subject with also an academic interest. So she has done lots of study about creativity and about the processes, and not only academic study, but she's surveyed friends. She has artist and writer friends as well. So she brings a lot of research into her thinking, but the writing is so clean and unadorned, so it's not dense at all, and that's one of the things I love about her work. And the other thing that I loved about this, there's so many interesting ideas in it, but also just the tone, is that Charlotte Wood, being so accomplished herself, could be really preaching down and talking to her audience, saying this is what creativity is about, but instead the tone is quite humble, and it's a real sense of wanting to learn and curiosity, and I love that. So it's a sense that she's really just interested in the subject, and she's still seeking out the answers as if she's just a person like you or me, whereas in fact, of course, she's this writer of the highest caliber. But there's things like, there's an essay about, she's tried to distill the processes that writers use, and she's got it down to 9. Some are conscious and some are unconscious or subconscious, and she sort of tries to identify what they are. And that in itself is interesting. So one of them is heat seeking. So you're looking at the work and finding the bit that has heat, the bit that's alive, and then using that as your, the basis for the work. And that reminded me of Philip Roth, who said that he looks at a page, finds the sentence that's alive and deletes everything else, and then works with that sentence and does that for every page of his, draft. And he says you might end up with only half a page of writing, but that's the bit that has the energy that you need to work with. So heat seeking, and then there's times where you just have to put it down. There are times where you just have to work through, and I can't remember what the other ones were, but there's that in itself is worth buying the book for. But there's also a great essay on art, and art that she doesn't like, but how we need art. I think it's called Art Is Not Shopping, and it's about we don't need art to be comfortable. And it starts with her working in a gallery, and there's all this art that's contemporary and very highly regarded, and all the reviewers have loved it, and the artists are very well known and so on, but she just doesn't like these paintings. And she sort of talks about why, but then she said a few weeks later she's working on a piece of a novel or a piece of writing, and some of the things in the paintings feed into her work, and she realizes that they've affected her. And she said art is not about being comfortable, it should disrupt. And I thought that was a thought-provoking concept. So there's a lot in this book, and it also just gives you a sense of the writer's life or the creative life. It's very accessible, it's wonderful company, and I really recommend it. So that's The Luminous Solution, Charlotte Wood, which was my non-fiction November highlight. And back to the novels, Colm Toíbín, The Magician. So this is Colm Toíbín's latest novel. It's about the life of Thomas Mann, the Nobel laureate and great writer from Germany. He lived through 2 world wars, so I think late 1800s through to, was it the 1950s, or I'm not sure how long he lived actually, I have to check. But that sounds like it could be quite dry or slow because it's the life of a writer, lives a lot in his interior world, but it is just beautiful. I can't explain why. Annie and I did a podcast on it. We couldn't put our finger on what is the magic, as it were, of this book. But one thing is the writing. It's really tight, even though it's quite a long novel, and it has a gentle feel to it. There is, make no mistake, the writing is crystal clear and not a wasted word, and the dialogue is sharp, witty. The Thomas Mann's family is quite extraordinary in their own right. His wife Katia, his children who are artistic and successful in various measures and have strong personalities and don't necessarily get on with him very well. And so it's very messy and dysfunctional in a sort of realistic way, and that's really fun to read, but told with love and compassion as well. And he has a wonderful mix of moving from describing something and being quite sort of these beautiful descriptions and sense of place, and being in Europe between the wars, to action and having a scene where people are arguing with each other, or he goes somewhere, or a book comes out or something like that. So it's really it's a page turner in that sense. And it was just after reading lots of books that are trying to be about something and sometimes feel too contrived, this just felt really effortless, and he doesn't try to make more of it than what it is. And to be fair, the life of Thomas Mann has enough drama and things happening in it that you don't need to embellish too much. But he moves to America, and when he's in America, he's the most famous or most important German after Einstein living in America at that time. So that gives you a sense of his stature while he was alive. So it gives you an insight into the sort of things that may have influenced his writing, The Magic Mountain, Death in Venice, and some of his other works, Dr. Faustus. And he was a gay man, but closeted. He couldn't be openly gay, so he was married to Katia. They seem to have a good understanding. She's a great character. But Colm Toíbín imagines beautifully, and I think having had access to Thomas Mann's diaries, imagines the sorts of things he might have thought about and then put into his novels, or imagines his thought process really, really beautifully, and it feels very true. It's just a wonderful read. So I highly recommend this. That's The Magician. That's in my top books of the year. Another one that is also in my top books of the year, 7.5 by Christos Tsiolkas. This is his latest novel. He's very well known for The Slap, which was longlisted for the Booker Prize and shortlisted for the Miles Franklin. Then Barracuda and Damascus is his most recent before this one. So Christos Tsiolkas lives in Melbourne, and there's a bit in this about his upbringing in a Greek family, and it's just got a wonderful feel to it. And this book is about a man called Christos who's a writer and goes to a house by the beach to write a novel. And that sounds a little bit like Christos Tsiolkas himself, and it is, and I read it as quite memoirish, and I normally don't like this mix of fact and fiction because you never quite know where you stand and how much is true and how much is, I'd like to just take the leap into a fictional world and know that I'm in that world, or read a memoir, and I often get unsettled by things that are in between, but he pulls this off just beautifully. And what I loved about it was I felt like I was having an escape to the beach and shutting out the rest of the world to write a novel, and I was doing it vicariously through Christos, which I was just delighted to be doing that. And I thought it was also a very generous thing to let us into his creative process. And this actually speaks really well to The Luminous Solution by Charlotte Wood, who also really generously lets us into her process and shares a lot with us. So he actually takes you through his thinking. He doesn't want to write about big issues, racism, climate change, all those sorts of, justice. He wants to write about little b beauty, and he wants to really just turn away from all the issues in the world. He finds books about those often too preachy or moralizing, or, not good books, or too safe. People are too concerned with being safe or saying the right thing, and he thinks that kills art. So that's really provocative. It resonated with me because I think some books do fall foul of that, but that's you could have a whole discussion with Christos Tsiolkas about that. It would be fascinating to hear him talk about it a bit more. So Christos, the narrator of the novel, is thinking through his story that he'll write. So he accesses memories of people that feed into the characters. He goes for walks on the beach. He goes for ocean swims. He observes nature. That all then starts to feed through the novel, and we see him start to write the novel, which is a story of Paul, who's an ex-porn star who goes to LA to see an old fan who's offered to pay a huge sum of money for him to spend the weekend with him. So that, and he manages to organically and sort of seamlessly merge the interior world and the sort of world of the narrator thinking about writing the story into the actual story in a way that is seamless and worked beautifully, and I just absolutely loved it. So I really recommend this. That's 7.5. And then one that I'm reading now, but I haven't got very far yet, is How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo Mbue, and she wrote Behold the Dreamers, which I loved. This is her latest novel set in a town in Africa with a climate crisis, but apparently it has a hopeful tone, at least by the end, which is good. This was on the New York Times 10 Best Books of 2021, so I had it on my shelf, but having seen them raving about it in their podcast, I thought I might take this down and read that next. So that's How Beautiful We Were. I'll report back on that. Let me know what you've been reading, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.